This is a piece of colored film that only cost me about $1, and I used it for all of my lighting on my short film, Ghost Letters. The reason why I think these are great for creative lighting is because they have a really big punch of color, and one of my main goals was I really wanted the lighting to feel very believable while also being moody. This is also an even cheaper alternative that you can pretty much buy at any arts and crafts store, and you just cut up the pieces to your specifications, which can also serve sort of like gels, and I use these extensively as well. Now, although I could have used more professional looking studio lighting, I ended up choosing these films because this allowed me to simply put them over my household fixtures to give a more natural or believable look. And I oftentimes feel as though some of the more professional lighting sometimes can feel a little bit disjointed from the experience, as if it's trying too hard to look good. So I really wanted it to feel like you were actually inside someone's home to sell that feeling of vulnerability. The great thing about these color films is they come in all different types of colors, so they can suit any type of mood or feeling that you want. And you can even combine them to get even more interesting colors or to change the level of diffusion if that's what you desire. Now, although I love natural lighting, sometimes the situation doesn't always call for that. There are many creative projects, and this one was a horror film, so I definitely wanted to be at night. I wanted to feel dark. I definitely wanted maybe a little bit more pop in that scene. So that's why I wasn't able to use natural lighting, even though that's sometimes what I would ideally prefer for a more natural look. If you're thinking of getting some of these for your project, I would recommend starting off with yellow, orange, and red. These hues have a shorter wavelength, which will theoretically reduce the contrast of your image, but the softness and warmness might be more appealing overall, comparable to tungsten. They also make the most sense for indoors because they are the closest to the realm of possibility inside a household. But you can definitely experiment with more interesting colors like purple, blue, or green if you're pursuing a highly creative look like Euphoria. I wanted to experiment with different color combinations, so I got all of them. They're extremely cheap anyway. This entire pack of 9 cost me $3. You can also leave the protective film on top if you want even more hazy diffusion. The reason you'd use these over dedicated bi-colored studio lighting is quite simple: money, space, and freedom from constraints. You can fit these filters over any surface to have consistent colors across multiple light sources without worrying about motivating them within the scene, because it naturally belongs there. You simply attach it with some clear tape, and it should be invisible if you cover it properly. I did use some lights from my smart home, but reserved the right to gel them because I wanted some color separation through mixed lighting. This method of practical lighting also saves a lot of time in the end because you're lighting for the scene as opposed to optimizing it for each shot. Once you're done setting up, you won't need to disrupt the flow of acting because you'll require fewer pauses to adjust lighting. I originally wanted to use the color orange, but ended up on yellow because there's an important scene with red later on, and I felt orange and red were too close. Yellow is also a more agreeable lamp color, and I think you'll agree after your own trial and error that it feels the best. This is probably why Soderbergh and Fincher films use yellow LEDs for that grungy look. However, these gels can put the scene at risk of being too monochromatic. If everything is yellow, then it loses impact. That's why sometimes stills from a movie can look overly warm or green, but we don't notice it when watching because our perception gets used to it over time. The yellow could have been overpowering and flat, but adding some normal lights can balance it out, making the splash of yellow feel intentional but not gimmicky. That's why I mixed in these very common rice paper floor lamps from IKEA to have more color separation. The white light of the bathroom was also a conscious choice because I knew it would be red at the end. So by first making it white, it gives a false sense of security and leads to a more shocking contrast for when it does change color. I think for yellow lighting in particular, it looks great when it's angled downwards. This is why I love lamp. These practicals create a moody atmosphere because the angle doesn't spill across the whole room and we can preserve the shadows. But the downside of using household bulbs is that they will likely not have as much power compared to dedicated cinema lights. In practice, they'll often be limited to ambient lighting, and the only reason I was able to get away with a dimmer light is because it was a horror film and it doesn't need to be exposed perfectly. That means, if you use the same method as me, you'll likely need faster glass. I like to film around 400 ISO for darker situations like this to have less noise and more detail in the shadows. That meant about T1.4 to T2 to sufficiently expose this scene. You should also note that the dimmer lighting means that contrast will be affected as it spills into the shadows. I still prefer this to point source lights indoors, but maybe it's also because I want to separate my look from what everyone else is doing. I mainly avoid artificial lighting because I'm over-analytical when watching films, and it becomes very distracting to me when something looks disagreeably lit or motivated. That's why gels feel more immersive and agreeable to me. If you're having trouble with light, then using more powerful bulbs is still an option. As for the quality of the highlights, I've always been a fan of plastic diffusion or shower curtains, which give me that softer diffused look that I like. I also prefer to gel lights as opposed to the camera, because I find this method gives more color contrast and cleaner shadows. It doesn't make for the most impressive lighting setup, as it doesn't feel as professional or pop as much as a giant source. But on the upside, it's potentially more believable and less offensive. This is the main scene where you can see all the lighting. I have the main room lit by the yellow lamp, and a paper floor lamp to expose the face. I ended up adding some negative fill so it didn't spill onto the wall and clash with the yellow shadows. I had another identical floor lamp providing a tiny bit of light to give context to the doorway on the right, but I blocked it slightly so it wouldn't fully illuminate the door until the motion detector turned on. Because I wanted the center pillar to be in focus and the background blurred, I decided to light it with another room's light by simply leaving the door open. I could have kept this wall and living room dark, but I thought I would try to make things brighter to have more context to convey the vulnerability of a real living space. My philosophy has always been to avoid making lighting distracting, even if it means exposing suboptimally. But I think the imperfection here makes a lot of sense for the story, and I like how it turned out. Cinematic lighting should foremost serve the story, and doesn't always have to look ideal. Audience IQ has gone up, and I think we're entering into an age of authenticity where even the general population understands lighting and can feel its incongruities. I'm not claiming this is the best or future direction of lighting, rather that it feels honest to me. So maybe we don't need to always strive for perfection, and just trust what our instincts tell us.